I'm going to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Simsbury Planning Commission to order, 7:02. Today is Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. I'd like to thank SCTV for recording these proceedings. And if everyone would please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to the roll call. Holly Bem.
Here.
David Blooming.
Here.
Aaron Levitt-Smith.
Here.
Craig McCormack.
Check.
Alan Needham.
Here.
William Rice. Present. Elizabeth Byrd.
Present.
Richard Cortez.
Here.
Gary Lungarini. Absent. Okay, we have a full set of regular commissioners, so there's no need to appoint any alternates to the full spot. Okay, let's move on to the approval of the minutes of the February 13th, 2018 regular meeting. Mr. Needham, if you could walk us through that.
And we are talking about the minutes of February 13th.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, let's take a look at page one. It's pretty simple stuff. Anybody have anything they noticed on page one? Page two? No corrections? Okay, looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 13th, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. You get that okay, Mike?
You got it.
All right.
You got to roll.
What did you print to you?
Moving on to old business, we have no outstanding public hearings and no pending applications. We will continue to move on to new business. There are no receipts of new applications, but we do have a referral. Under CGS 8-3A, a referral to the Zoning Commission for Zoning Commission application number 8-15 of Michael Glidden, CFM, Assistant Town Planner, for text amendments to the Town of Simsbury zoning regulations to sections of the regulations pertaining to flood management. Article 4, Section B, definitions, Article 7, Sections M.2 through 7, and Article 12. And we happen to have Mr. Glidden here tonight, and maybe you could explain a little bit of what's going on.
So in your packet, you have a staff report that's both to you and the Conservation Commission, because this text amendment has been referred to both commissions for input from the Zoning Commission. The long and short of it is the current flood regulations were last adopted in 2008. As the Zoning Commission was looking to update their zoning regulations as part of a comprehensive relook of the regulations in its entirety, I forwarded our floodplain regulations to the state just to make sure that we're current with NFIP, that's National Flood Insurance Program participation requirements. As it turns out, you have about 12 pages of housekeeping updates that we are required to do. A lot of these changes are their participation requirements for the National Flood Insurance Program. And I can walk through each individual changes, or I've kind of outlined in my staff report some of the sections, such as in Article 4B, that's definitions. There are a series of definitions that are required to be in your regs, which are not. These are being added. If anyone has any questions about any of those regulations, I can answer those. I'll move on. Those are new definitions. And there's also 4, 3, four definitions which are in the regulations, however, need to be modified. Those definitions are basement. There's some language that needs to be added, that all sides of the floor subgrade being located are considered, that's part of the classification for a basement. Development, the definition needs to be expanded. Improvement and substantial improvement. That definition is being modified, and as part of that modification, because we're updating our regs with the new language, it enables people in town to qualify for increased cost of compliance grants should a disaster be declared. Those are grants that the homeowner is available to get up to $30,000 of a zero-interest loan through FEMA for either elevating, demolishing, or relocating existing structures. So this is a direct benefit homeowners will see. They have to have a flood insurance policy. The last is just clarifying for floodplain management the definition of structure. Does anyone have any questions on definitions at this point? Then going into Article 7, Section M, it's the floodplain zone. There are a series of subsections that need to be revised. The first is the identification of the special flood hazard area. It's referring to the current firm or flood insurance rate map, and also which flood designations we deal with, which are AE and A and mapped floodway zones in the town of Simsbury. AE is an area of which a base flood elevation is determined and a number is associated with it. An A zone is an approximate zone, means that there was not a detailed study. And graphically, the federal insurance, FEMA kind of delineates an area which could be subject to flooding. And last is obviously the mapped floodway, which are studied water courses such as the Farmington River, obviously, but there are other regulatory floodways in town. The next has to deal with administration. First, it provides protection for existing structures. If your structure was built prior to the implementation of these codes, it will not be considered in violation of this reg. It's pre-regulation. So we're not going to drive around and say everyone who built prior to this magic date, you're in violation. It only comes into play when they want to renovate or change their house. The other is just disclaimers that these are interpretation guidance, and also a disclaimer to protect staff because we're not liable. These maps that we base our regulatory decisions on are worst case scenarios, but there could be events that exceed the area that's mapped. So there could be people who are subject to flood damage that may not be mapped as being in a floodplain. They may be adjacent to a floodplain. Next is the duties of the responsibilities of floodplain administrator. I'm the floodplain administrator for the town, so this is kind of my job of the following activities that are outlined in this section, what I am required to do from reporting and also for just day-to-day reviewing of permits. Next is the provision of floodplain reduction. Kind of gives people a list of activities, which are the intention of these activities are to reduce the likelihood of loss of property and life in a hazard event. And for homeowners, it can give them an idea of, there's certain things such as improvements to making sure that your utilities are flood-proofed, locating your septic system. If you're in a floodplain and you have this on-site sewage disposal system, you're located in an area that will not be subject to erosion, or the connections to the system from the house are flood-proof, so you don't have water infiltrating that system, and popping, for example, the tank out of the ground, or could be compromising the dry wells or the galleys, whatever is underground, also with that tank. Next is standards for water courses that are unnumbered A zones. So those are the areas, like I said, that are not part of a detailed study. They have approximate. In those cases, the applicant has some responsibilities to provide detailed information in order to assure that his or her development will not have an adverse effect to the area that's subject to the flooding. Because if there's not a detailed study, actions such as requesting a detailed study of the watercourse in order to establish a base flood elevation, this commission may recall. We required that associated with the crossing improvements on Casterbridge Crossing. They had to establish a base flood elevation in order to determine that their culverts were built at the proper elevation so floodwaters can go to and fro. And the other thing is that there's a discussion on homes that are in an unnumbered A zone, recommendations on how to handle those situations. The comment, I believe it's just elevating the structure 2 feet, meeting our freeboard requirement off the finished existing grade. Last is specific standards in subsection 7. This has been added to illustrate the difference between floodproofing for residential structures versus non-residential or commercial structures. Residential structures are required to elevate. A commercial structure or non-residential has an option of elevating or floodproofing accordance to, there's a specific standard that the applicant's design professionals are held to. The last section of change it's an entirely new section. It's Article 12 of the zoning regulations. That is specific to variances. Should a variance be granted in a floodplain zone, there are some very strict standards that the Zoning Board of Appeals has to follow. Granting a variance in a floodplain zone, there's very limited cases of which it's allowed, and FEMA outlines to the communities, you have to do, if you're going to grant a variance, you have to check all of these criteria off in order to grant the variance. Such as if it's a historic structure and improvements to the structure help preserve the historical characteristics of that structure, it's an appropriate variance to grant. They would have to elevate their structure or do other improvements that are required under the code. But like I said, that's a very narrow window that's outlined in the regs.
So elevation refers to the structure itself, not the property.
That's correct. Yeah, you wouldn't want them to raise the entire crate up.
Well, there are places where they have built that they have to raise.
Well, that brings up,
along the road.
in that case, if someone wanted to do site improvements, let's say they wanted to do an addition and do some regrading of their property, they could do that. However, under the regs and guidance of FEMA, they would have to do a detailed study to show that they're not deflecting the floodwaters if they're in an AE or A zone to their neighbor. If they're in a floodway, however, the filling and grading within a floodway is prohibited. It's prohibited under the current regs. It would be prohibited under these regs.
So, Mike, I understand that these are mandatory changes,
Correct.
right? And the Planning Commission has a referral responsibility,
That is correct.
okay? And of course, that referral would be based on the Plan of Conservation and Development, 2017. So I'd like to make a motion that the Simsbury Planning Commission return a positive referral to zoning application number 18-15 on the basis that it is consistent with the 2017 Plan of Conservation and Development.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Do we need a second?
Craig, second.
I whispered it, but I seconded it.
Oh,
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let me just ask a question here, and if the commission will indulge me. Under general commission business, I see an item regarding the subdivision regulations, special flood hazard area. Is that related to
Yeah, I can explain that when we get to that item, unless the chairman, you want to do that
I don't
first?
know, if it's the same subject and it's being driven by the same
It is.
factors, I'd like to take it up now if no one has any
That's fine.
objections. So is that okay, Mike?
That's fine.
Okay. So now we will take up General Commission Business Number 2, subdivision regulations, special flood hazard area. Again, Mr. Michael Glidden.
Thank you. So as part of the requirement for the zoning commission, the subdivision regulations have to reflect current National Flood Insurance standards. And I passed around, you'll notice it's a black and white copy, but it's page 15 of your regs. This is where these changes would go into effect. And I apologize, attached to it also was another part that was not supposed to be. But the page 15 and 16 that's mandatory National Flood Insurance participation requirements. It's similar to the zoning commission. This, however, you would have to hold a public hearing. So staff, we were not going to just file this application without the commission being aware of this. And also, if there's any other low-hanging fruit within the subdivision regulations that you may want to address, Jamie attached to this, it was the fee in lieu of open space portion of the regulations. That could be for another conversation. But the flood regulations, really, that's the one you really need to do.
You say we need to hold a public hearing before we can address it.
That's correct. Because it'll be referred to CROG, and the public has to have a chance, just like with the zoning commission, a chance to comment if they have any concerns. But if there are any other regulations that you'd like to discuss with the current subdivision regulations, you could do that all at one shot if anyone has any concerns. Otherwise, we could separate the activities.
Was that the intention of the inadvertent attachment?
Yeah, I apologize for that.
So you want us to disregard that for now?
Disregard that for now.
Okay. At the time of the public hearing, would we be able to discuss potential changes, or should we have the potential changes already identified?
We should identify the potential changes before, for notice purposes. And also, like I said, it would have to be referred out to the capital region.
Okay, any time limitations here? Do we have to get the flood-related items?
I prefer to push the flood regs forward and hopefully shoot for second meeting in May adoption, so public hearing, first meeting in May. And I'm just saying, should we need two meetings, making sure that we obviously fulfill our notice requirements first. If you have other items that you want to add or discuss, I mean, we could have that conversation now.
I'm not prepared to discuss
Or,
it right now.
no, I'm just, or we can have that we can put that on your agenda for the next meeting.
That's what I would suggest.
Okay, I will do that.
Let's try one meeting, Mike, before we notice for the public hearing,
Okay,
all right? If there are changes that commissioners would like to have be considered, I'd like to do it all at once. I understand we need to get the flood-related ones in there, but if there's other items, try to get them one shot.
yeah, and we have time because, zoning, their public hearing for their regs is scheduled for April 15th. If I inform the state that the zoning commission finished theirs and planning will be updating the subdivision, let's just say in May, I would say Diane Ipkovich will work with us on that. She's not going to send a letter saying, you have 30 days to do this activity.
Okay.
So
my suggestion, commissioners, is that we have an item on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss both the proposed change that Mr. Glidden has presented to us, And also, I ask that everyone review the subdivision regulations and see if there are items that perhaps we should propose for revision. Okay, and then the intent would be to set the public hearing date at the next meeting.
Yeah, we would file the application first.
Okay.
But we could set a I mean, if you authorize staff, I mean, staff would file the application and handle all of the notice requirements, then it would be, we can give you the date at the next hearing.
Okay.
It's provided that if there's agreement on any specific other changes that you want to make.
So is that different than what I said?
No, just wordy.
Okay, but.
Sorry.
Okay. I don't wanna slow the process down.
Yeah.
Okay, but we do need at least one more meeting to review the subdivision regulations. Okay? Do we need a motion for that, or no, that's just, everyone okay?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So that meeting to discuss these will be on the 10th, April 10th?
May, wait a minute, today is March, right?
Yeah.
Is March.
That's 2 weeks from
2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
It's our
April
next
10th.
meeting, April 10th.
I
Thank
will
you,
not be
Craig.
here.
I won't have
Okay.
it.
If
School
you,
vacation.
if you have things you want us to consider, you can send them
Yep.
to all the commissioners,
Great.
okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that goes for anybody. If you're not going to be here April 10th, and you do have some input for potential revisions, please email it to all the commissioners and town staff. Great, now we'll back up a little bit. CJS 8-25A, 1, a request for a 5-year extension to application number 1303 of Andrew Quirk, PE of Kratzer, Jones and Associates Incorporated, agent for Joel and Marilyn Sevick, owners requesting a re-subdivision of property located at 46 Hildercrest Drive, map C17, block 404, lot 010, to allow for the creation of 5 lots. Now, this was an application that was approved on May 14th, 2013, and it was an approval good for 5 years. So now the expiration date is 5/14/2018, and from what I can gather, the owner hasn't started the work yet, right? Or-
He's in the middle of working. He has a binder coat down on the travel surface of the proposed road. However, he has some repairs he has to make out there. The road has not been accepted by the town yet, nor has the sewer. He extended the sewer service in. He wants to proceed to do the work, and he's working in consultation with the town engineer and the WPCA. He very likely will not complete these public improvements for May of this year. He is requesting the extension so that he can at least take his time, and staff supports that request. We prefer that he, finish it in September versus finish it for May, because there is a lot of moving parts. The sewer has to be inspected and approved. The road, the travel service there's compaction tests and supervision that's required for some of the repairs and the final work, and along with having this roadway accepted by the town, because this is supposed to be a public road. So,
Yeah, just maybe for clarification for the commissioners, the application was approved, I'll say, with a condition that it was good for 5 years, okay? That's pretty standard operating procedure. So now this developer is kind of up against the wall a little bit here. Do they intend to go forward with the project?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and this will help him market some of the lots once he completes the public improvements. I think he has not sold a lot yet, and that was one of our concerns too. We didn't want to have him rush to finish the improvements, sell a lot, and then here we're stuck with a road that has deficiencies that now the town has inherited, versus the developer is on the hook to do repairs to assure that it's to the standard of the town for acceptance. And he's, it appears that he's shooting to finish this work and have the road accepted in the next calendar year, so probably fall of this year. But he wants the 5 years just for assurance.
And I think our regulations allow us to consider an extension.
Yeah, and
I know they do.
he's allowed by statute too. Statute says all your approvals are valid for 5 years to be extended up to 10, so a 5-year extension to it. This is pretty standard.
Commissioners, any comments, questions? Yeah, these always strike me as being a little odd. You've given an applicant 5 years to complete the public improvements, and yet they haven't done it. But by the same token, I know that there are certain circumstances that prevent things from happening.
We had an economic downturn.
Yep. Anyone else have any thoughts? I know that we've approved at least 2 of these extensions during my tenure on the commission.
What's just out of curiosity, with the thought process around establishing that 5-year window?
Statute.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And it gets complicated because during the downturn, there's actually approvals out there, like, we granted a 5-year extension to the Meadowwood application. Everyone may recall that. That fell under a different time period for approvals. That actually was by statute granted a 9-year approval, not to exceed 14.
Right.
But this is standard 5, not to extend 10.
It's not to exceed 10?
Not to exceed 10.
So this would be the only extension they could have?
Yeah, and the time period really is to complete the public improvements. It's to
Okay.
protect the public, to say that, either your road's completed, the sewer work is completed, water service is extended. And in the case of Murphy's Turn, the sewer has been extended into the project. Like I said, the road it's binder course right now, but needs to be completed. So he's made some substantial improvements to the area, but he hasn't completed everything yet.
And you can't sell a lot until he does.
Can't sell a lot, no one can he can sell a lot, but no one's gonna get a CO on a road that's not complete.
Right.
And furthermore, what will be a problem is no one will get a CO to a sewer that hasn't been accepted by the WBCA. So,
Any other comments, questions? Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we extend the application for 5 more years. Did I do that right, Mike?
grant the 5-year extension.
I move that we grant the 5-year extension.
And that's for application 13-03.
Yes, second.
Seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We've come to the part of our agenda where I like to ask town staff if there's been any correspondence or anything we should be briefed on.
Today I was at a meeting with CROG for updated hazard mitigation plan. That is, the COG is required every 5 years to update the hazard mitigation plan. I'm the plan coordinator for the town of Simsbury. So we were in Manchester talking about mitigation, and the town of Simsbury, to your credit, was a poster child. We discussed a lot, whether it be One Old Bridge or our participation in this update. We've been pretty active in trying to look at some different hazards, not just flooding, such as wildfires, and we brought up a few other incidents that need to be assessed.
Great.
To your credit.
Anything else, commissioners? No, okay. Make a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn made by Craig McCormack, seconded by the balance of the commission. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned at 7:32.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.